Alright, so I'll do quick introductions, inshallah, and just share some thoughts about components of a good weekend school, how weekend schools are different than full-time Islamic school or public school, the needs of a Muslim weekend student, and some communication skills to better connect with our students, inshallah. And then we'll close with some concepts related to leadership development, and how, as teachers, we can demonstrate that leadership in our classrooms, inshallah. So a little about myself. I'm an engineer by education. I have a degree in electrical engineering and another degree in systems engineering. I got involved with youth about 25 years ago in coaching and leadership development, and then also did weekend school teaching. Currently, I do weekend school for teenagers, so ages 13 and above. From the Islamic Leadership Institute of America, we do leadership training and development for ages 9 through 27, so college and graduates. I'm a very big believer in risk taking. If you're dealing or working with young people, you have to have some trust in them, and you have to be willing to take some risk. And I hope this is a concept you can remember, inshallah, today, because with weekend schools, it's a little different than a full-time school. As we'll see later, these people go to some other schools during the week from Monday to Friday, and this weekend school is on top of what they're already doing in their lives. So it needs to have a little bit different flavor or an expectation for both the student and the teacher compared to a full-time institute. So when working with youth, we have to be risk takers. If we are not willing to take risk, it's going to be difficult to be effective with your students, because young people are more spontaneous. They have ideas in their mind, and they kind of want to go ahead and test out things. All right, so it's a little bit about me. What we want to do now, do we have cards, sheets of paper? Yeah, okay. So from your cards, inshallah, you can share a little bit, why do you teach in a weekend school? Obviously, it's a part-time, engagement. What are your goals for your students? So when you come in every Saturday for 28 weeks throughout the fall and spring, what are you trying to accomplish by the end of that school year for your students? And how are you measuring your goals as it relates to what you're trying to do? All right, so I thought we'd share a little bit of time on who are our youth, because if you're dealing with someone, it's important to understand who they are, right? So if you're selling cars, you're a car manufacturer, it's important to understand the profile of your drivers. Are they using the car to go to work or for recreation or what? So here our customer is a young person. So we want to understand who are these people. So the Muslim youth are very diverse in background. They come from different races and cultures. And obviously at weekend school, they're part-timers, right? They're kind of there just for the 3-4 hours on a Saturday, or maybe in some places Saturday and Sunday, but here it's just one day, right? Just Saturday. So obviously that puts some pressure on you as a teacher to deal with a diverse population in your classroom. So we're coming from different public schools. Like the brother said, they might have different ages. So when it comes to reading Quran, they might be at the same level, but you can have a 15-year-old and maybe a 12-year-old in the same group, or a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. And obviously, their ages difference causes a little bit of a challenge for us as educators to kind of bridge that gap in what we explain and how we explain it, to make it make sense for everyone in that group. All right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defined or discussed the Muslim youth as people who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He has increased them in that connection. Alhamdulillah, when we do surveys for weekend school students and gatherings like last night and so forth, usually the number one priority on the list is to learn the deen. So we ask people, why are you here today? Or what are your priorities in life? Is it to make money, to have fun, to go out with your friends, or to learn or to know about Islam? And usually to learn about Islam is the top priority. So that's the good news, is that people who come to the weekend schools or the masjid halaqas, they want to actually learn. Now, the sad news is there's many other people, multiples of them outside, who don't come to these types of forums. And unfortunately, maybe learning about Islam is not their top priority. But the fact that they're interested makes it, should be easier for us, inshallah. We have that, acceptance already from most of them. Shukran, ya akhi. All right, so maybe we can just show of hands, go around and share some challenges that you face in your classrooms. We can start with the sister here, just go around, inshallah. So if you can tell us the main age group that you work with and just one main challenge that you see every weekend in your classroom. Okay, so respect between the students and each other. So what we notice here is some of what the challenges you mentioned are common with full-time schools, like maybe motivation and relevance of what I'm learning to my life. But some are very unique to the weekend school setting, like parents are not engaged, you find that more, or kids who leave their stuff at home, or they come late, and so forth. So obviously there's a lot more that we need to do on our shoulders. But also there's another thing we need to keep in mind, is what we're trying to achieve in the weekend school really fit for the weekend school setting? And that's a question we want to think about, because maybe we're trying to put a square peg into a circle, and it's not going to work, right? So in some cases, with a small percentage of the students it would work, but with the majority of them, it might not work. So like the sister in the back was saying, her goal is just to make sure they can read, so that later they can continue that education on their own, whether they decide to go to some other program, outside of the masjid, or a full-time school sometime in the future when they grow up maybe, or they work independently with their parents or whatever. But her objective is very clear. She wants to do the bare minimum where they can become independent learners when it comes to reading, for example. So maybe by focusing on very specific objectives, we'll have better outcomes, rather than trying to deal with it as if it's a full-time school when it really isn't. That fact that you see them once a week and many other things make it a little bit impractical. So keep that in mind, and then we'll see what works for your community. All right, so moving on, knowing about youth. Obviously you mentioned some of these things. They're missing things at home, they talk, they're defiant, and so on. So you're pretty familiar with these issues. But we kind of grouped the challenges that youth have in the Muslim community to three things. One is their identity, right? So like some of the sisters said, they come from different backgrounds. And some might be from immigrant families. So am I Pakistani or American? Am I Arab or American? Or, who am I really? And they might go to, usually they go to public school. In some cases, I don't know if you have any homeschooled youth in your weekend? Okay. The second thing is temptations, like the brother said, cell phones, distractions, right? Opposite gender, things that happen at the public school. So in the public school, they're used to talk to each other in a certain way. They're used to challenge the teacher in a certain way, academically and intellectually, right? So the teacher explains something and it's like, all right, what you're saying doesn't make sense, explain it to us in a different way. And if we're not trained to deal with that because of the different cultures, we might get offended, or we might feel that they're trying to challenge us when they're really just trying to understand. And then lastly, the support infrastructure, the parents, right? The parents who are late, the parents who, the day before were out late. They're not taking it seriously, they're not following up. The brother's unable to connect with the parents because they don't respond to his text messages and things like that. Plus other things. So it's important to understand what they go through before they actually come to you 9 o'clock on Saturday, right? What was their week like, Monday through Friday, those 5 days that you weren't with them? It's stuff like this. I want to be popular in my school. I'm being called names, or someone told me to go back to my home country, or some girl pushed me in the bathroom, right? So they're already coming to you with some baggage and some stress because of some of these things we see on the screen. Or maybe there's an issue at home, right? There's a fight between the parents, or whatever the case might be. Of course, we know that there's a lot of influence from the society around us on our values and principles, right? And as a group of people in this country, we're impacted by whatever the media is presented to us. And as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ mentions, there'll come a time when you follow the disbelievers, foot by foot, arm length by arm length,
up to the point if they go into a lizard hole, you will go right after them. And our children are no different than that. They're not immune to that, right? So if a new trend takes place in their public school, they're going to start to be impacted by that and want to follow it and be part of it as well. All right, now compounded with the fact that education in general is becoming less attractive in this country and globally, because people today can earn a living, when they turn 18 or 16 without any education. So you can open a business online, you can sell stuff, you can go get a certificate and become an IT, network person or an Amazon AWS or whatever it is. And usually for the middle school group, they know that, right? A lot of these middle schoolers, they track or follow the stock market, they see what's going on and so forth. So like the brother was saying here, why should I come to this weekend school? So maybe for the younger ones, 5 through 12, they're still not mature enough to know this stuff. But once they go to middle school, they're 11, 12, 13, they kind of realize that education today is not as important as it used to be for my parents or grandparents. So not only, you're telling them to go to a full-time school trying to convince them about it, you're taking them on a weekend to also what they see as extra and beyond. Now we talked a little bit about that. Temptations, I think, that's clear. Support system, we mentioned that as well. All right, so moving on. These are, again, the 3 key challenges that Muslim youth face: their identity, their distractions and temptations, and the support infrastructure around them, right? The masjid, the extended family, the library, the ability to move from one point to another. Like many of us came from other countries, right? When we were kids, 8 or 10, you can literally open your door and go to your neighbor's house and play with them. But our kids can't do that. They need a drive. They need a parent to drive them, and most of us don't have the time to do that. So they're missing that social interaction element. And when they come to your weekend school, that is actually their opportunity to, fulfill that social need. So it's very normal for them to talk to each other. It's very normal for them not to want to do anything else other than that, because the whole week they did not have that opportunity. After school, they did not have that opportunity to go to the, Ahmed's house next door to play for half an hour while, the dinner is ready and that kind of thing. All right, so how does it reflect? It reflects on them in the form of stress. They talk back, they forget their stuff, they become disobedient, they don't want to go to the weekend school, so they start skipping. You might see people who are inconsistent, they come 1 week, 2 weeks not, and then the next week, and so forth. Or they just don't perform. They don't do their homework, they don't bring their books, and so on. All right, so real quick here, we did some surveys with weekend school students. These are middle schoolers, so they're a little older. The thing here, what we're showing, the important one, about 1/3 of the students have some doubt of Islam in some form, right? And that's important to understand. So you're trying to teach someone tajweed, right? Noon sakina and iqlab and idgham and all this good stuff, but they have a fundamental issue to start with, which is like, what is this hereafter? So I believe in Allah, I believe in the angels, but I don't believe in this hereafter thing. I can't understand it, right? Or you're trying to make them memorize Quran, which they do, they memorize it, but they don't know how to apply it in life. Like, why am I memorizing this stuff? How does it help me at school when I'm being bullied? Or how does it help me become a better person? So what studies have shown, actually, there was a study done at, I think, Wayne University here in Michigan, that they found 40% of the Muslim students in college actually leave Islam. That was a little high statistic, but nationally it's in the 20s, upper 20s, 28 to 30, 32% of Muslim youth, by the time they get to college, 2022, they leave Islam. ISPU, I don't know if you're aware of ISPU, they did a study and it's also around 25%. So the percentages are high, right? And what's striking is many of these kids went to weekend schools, or some even went to full-time schools. So they had an environment where they can learn Islam, they can understand some of these things. So it's important that we keep that in mind, that the person in front of me who I'm trying to teach, whatever it is I'm teaching them, might have a bigger need than that finer detail that I'm trying to fulfill. We can skip some of that. The good thing about prayers, most people pray on time, or they pray all 5 prayers, the same day, maybe late. But the majority of middle schoolers say prayer is important, and they try to, keep praying. All right, so let's take some time. Maybe you can work in groups of 2 or 3 to brainstorm a solution in your classroom that you can do in the weekend school to address one of these 3 areas: the identity area, the temptations, right, or the lack of a support system. Meaning, you got a classroom, maybe they don't have grandparents in this country, right, or at all. How do you fill that void? All right, so we'll take maybe 5-10 minutes. You can brainstorm what is an activity you can do in your class to address this, where it could be still connected to what you're teaching them. So if you're teaching them Quran, how can I connect that Quran to identity, or to temptations, or lack of a good support system? Jazakumullah khairan. So what we got so far from the brothers is, as related to identity, is to have open discussions, maybe at the beginning of the session. Hey guys, how was your week? Tell us something exciting that happened this week at school, things like that. Or you can reflect on an incident, like when Kobe died a couple of weeks ago. We spoke about that. It's like, hey, what's going on this week? Who can, and that opened a few other topics to talk about. Relationship with women, hard work, perseverance, being a leader in the field, and different types of topics. And that gives you, as a teacher, also insights to what's interesting to them. So a couple of brothers brought up that, he was, there were allegations about him in the past that he had, inappropriate relationships with some women and whatnot. So we understood that that's something on their mind that they want to learn about. But most of the kids said he's a hard worker. He's persistent, so we talked about consistency and how to be patient to achieve goals, and progressive goals that are small, and so forth. So that idea can be definitely something you can explore. And then the idea of mentoring. So having a relationship with your student that's a little different than a full-time school, a more casual relationship, a relationship of trust, of older brother, younger brother type of thing, big brother, big sister. And they can open up and share some problems or questions, or just get general advice. Hey, when you were in middle school, what kind of sport did you play? They can ask those types of questions. For temptations, what the sister was suggesting is find alternative programs. So for children, they want to play. All right, let's take them to the zoo. And now this can be the Quran class for today, is Allah's creation and how He created many things. And we can talk about creation of the human being and relationships between men and women, and things like that. You can talk about different things in the Quran with other types of activities that make it more relevant. And then for support system, peer-to-peer contacts, I think that's also a good idea. Restrictions that we have as part-time teachers, and that's again back to my earlier point, is maybe we're trying